Beryl might be the greatest swordsman alive, but he doesn't realize it. Now in his 40s, he runs a small, quiet dojo out in the countryside, far from any real excitement. One morning, while he's going through his daily training drills in the yard, his father watches him with a heavy sigh and says he wishes there were some grandchildren around to keep him company. It's been years since Beryl took over the family dojo, but when it comes to romance, nothing has really changed. He's just as single as ever. Beryl replies that he's been too busy managing the dojo to worry about things like starting a family, but his father refuses to drop the subject. Half-jokingly, he even suggests Beryl should train a promising young female student and eventually marry her, but Beryl immediately shuts that idea down, pointing out how completely inappropriate that would be. The dojo has been passed down through their family for generations, and Beryl has dedicated himself fully to it since he inherited it. There was a time when he dreamed of gaining fame and respect as a swordmaster. Though his skills far outshine those of an ordinary swordsman, he's never thought of himself as deserving of such a grand title. Still, he takes pride in his role as a teacher, having trained many students who went on to achieve impressive things. Later that evening, after wrapping up the day's practice, Beryl sits down for dinner with his parents, but his father brings up the marriage talk again. Family, grandchildren, the whole works. He even tries to get Beryl's mother to back him up, though she takes a softer approach. She says these things can't be forced, but still hints that she hopes to see a grandchild someday. Beryl nearly chokes on his food at that. It's easy for them to say, but the reality is different. He doesn't even have a girlfriend, let alone any plans for a family. It's not like some beautiful woman is just going to show up at their doorstep. Except, right at that moment, there's a knock at the door. When Beryl answers it, he's stunned to see a strikingly beautiful woman standing there. She greets him politely, calling him master. Once he gets a closer look, he realizes it's Aludia Citrus, one of his former students. He invites her inside and offers her some tea while they catch up. Beryl remembers her well. She had been a gifted and hardworking student. What surprises him, though, is hearing that she's risen all the way to become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Wondering why she's come all this way, Beryl asks her about her visit. Alutia explains that, as Knight Commander, one of her responsibilities is to oversee the training of new recruits. After giving it some thought, she decided to personally recommend Beryl to become a special sword instructor, and to his shock, the Imperial Court approved her recommendation, making it an official command. That's why she's here, delivering the news in person. Beryl never really wanted to become an Imperial instructor, so his first instinct is to refuse the offer. But before he can even open his mouth, his father cuts in, warning him that rejecting an Imperial command isn't just rude, it could actually cost him his life. It's not something he can simply dismiss. Alutia quickly steps in, reassuring Beryl that no one's going to execute him for turning it down, but there would definitely be serious consequences. So, she says, it's probably safer if he just accepts. She then casually mentions that a carriage is already waiting to take them to the capital, and she'll explain the details of his new position the following day. Beryl is shocked that Alutia expects him to leave immediately, but his father doesn't seem bothered at all. In fact, he waves him off cheerfully, telling him to enjoy himself in the capital, and maybe even find a wife while he's there. He even jokes loudly that Alutia wouldn't be a bad choice. Mortified, Beryl tells his father to knock it off, especially since it's clearly making Alutia uncomfortable. He also points out that there's a big age gap between them. Still, Alutia shyly mutters that she wouldn't really mind. Not wanting to risk whatever serious consequences might come with refusing, Beryl agrees to go. While riding in the carriage with Alutia, Beryl notices something that catches him off guard. She's still carrying the sword he gave her, the very same blade he awards every student who graduates from his dojo. It's a symbol of completion, and she's kept hers in perfect condition all these years. He feels genuinely moved that she still values it so highly, although he thinks it's not nearly good enough for someone of her level. She could easily afford a better weapon from a skilled blacksmith, but Alutia insists she's perfectly happy with it. Beryl figures she's just being sentimental, that she still sees anything from her old teacher as more special than it really is. After all, in Beryl's mind, he's just an ordinary swordsman. He doesn't believe he's qualified to take on such an important role at the Imperial Academy. At that moment, Alutia grins and teases him, saying she's excited for the country bumpkin swordmaster to make his big debut in the capital. Beryl shoots her a puzzled look, wondering who on earth she's talking about. He's no bumpkin, and definitely not a swordmaster, at least in his own eyes. But Alutia insists otherwise. Whether he believes it or not, he's already famous among those who know swords. Many of his former students have gone on to become celebrated warriors and adventurers. In the right circles, Beryl is practically a legend, though Alutia admits she's not a huge fan of the nickname he's earned over the years. Beryl laughs at the story, but doesn't really believe it. As far as he's concerned, Alucia is probably the only person left who still thinks of him as anything special. Before long, they reached the royal capital. Alucia dropped Beryl off at a quiet little inn, telling him to get some rest and promising she'd come back for him in the morning. True to her word, she showed up the next day and brought him to the royal castle, where she formally introduced him to the Knight Order. Standing before the gathered recruits, Alucia proudly declared that Beryl was so talented that even she wouldn't stand a chance against him, and that they should consider themselves fortunate to be trained by someone of his level. However, not everyone seemed convinced. A few knights exchanged skeptical looks, and one in particular didn't bother to hide his disapproval. Clearly, some doubted whether Beryl really deserved the position. Later, as Beryl and Alucia strolled through the castle halls, she congratulated him on becoming an official special instructor. She explained that the role wouldn't be too demanding. He would only need to train the recruits 3 or 4 times a month. That way, he could still manage the dojo back in his village without much disruption. Suddenly, a young woman came running toward them, practically bursting with excitement. She had been waiting for this moment. Her name was Kiruni, a former student of Beryl's from a couple of years ago. Beryl remembered her well. Her dream had always been to join the Knight Order, and seeing her achieve it filled him with pride. Although she was still a trainee and had a long road ahead before becoming a full-fledged knight, she was thrilled to be able to train under Beryl once more. Alucia seemed just as happy about it too. Later that same day, Beryl returned home, expecting a quiet night, but the moment he stepped inside, he found a familiar face waiting for him, another old friend. It was Randrid, and he hadn't come alone. He had brought his wife and their newborn baby to introduce them. Beryl was overjoyed to see Randrid doing so well, but before he could say much, his father, as blunt as ever, cut in, telling Beryl not to come back until he had a wife and child of his own. Randrid had gone on to become a platinum-ranked adventurer after graduating from Beryl's dojo, an impressive achievement. But now that he had a family, he had decided to retire and return to the village. Beryl was surprised that Randrid would walk away from such a high-ranking adventurer status so easily, but he understood. The dangerous life of an adventurer wasn't ideal for someone with a family to protect. As they caught up, Randrid casually mentioned that he planned to help out by running the dojo. Beryl, confused, asked what he meant, and that's when his father dropped the real news. He had already decided that Randrid would take over the dojo, meaning Beryl no longer needed to stay. In short, his father had kicked him out, even though technically, Beryl was the owner of the dojo now.